There's an 80s movie that had Spielberg's name on it, until the studio saw the final cut and literally ripped him off the credits. One film tanked Paul McCartney's first post-Beatles single. Another got pulled from shelves because kids started trying to hack ATMs after watching it. These aren't cult classics. These are 15 awesome, weird-as-hell 80s movies that slipped through the cracks and totally deserve your time now. Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd play two total screw-ups who work for the government. They're basically decoys, sent on a fake mission just to distract the Soviets. Only problem? They don't realize it's fake. Turns out they are the real plan. It's a Cold War comedy that tries to mix classic buddy slapstick with nuclear paranoia. John Landis directed it, the same guy behind Trading Places and An American Werewolf in London, and Warner Brothers gave him a $22 million budget hoping this would launch a whole franchise. It didn't, but it still made $77 million worldwide, which wasn't bad at all for the time. The US military didn't love how it was portrayed, especially all the red tape and idiotic testing scenes. The Pentagon even blocked the filmmakers from using real missile bases. There was also a whole gag involving Reagan impersonators that the studio ended up cutting. They were worried it might stir up trouble. The theme song was written and performed by Paul McCartney. You'd think that would be a hit, right? But no, it bombed. First time one of his singles tanked in the US since the Beatles broke up. Still, the movie found a second life on cable and became a cult favorite. This one was produced by Berry Gordy, the guy who founded Motown, and it's basically a mashup of kung fu movies, 80s pop culture, and straight-up comic book energy, all set in Harlem. Ty Mack plays Leroy Green, a soft-spoken martial arts nerd on this spiritual journey to reach something called the glow, which is basically his final level of enlightenment. Along the way, he's trying to protect a music video host, played by Vanity, from getting kidnapped by this egomaniac video producer and a bunch of henchmen. The film was made for around $10 million, all out of Gordy's pocket, and while it didn't explode out the gate, it pulled in about $25 million just in the US, mostly thanks to word of mouth, especially with black audiences and teens. It became a huge midnight movie hit. Behind the scenes, there was drama with Vanity's casting. She was still under contract with Prince, who reportedly tried to block her from doing press for the movie, and MTV refused to promote the soundtrack, which was packed with Motown artists, claiming it was too urban. Gordy saw that for what it was, pulled Motown's partnership with MTV, and refused to work with them for a year. Despite all of that, The Last Dragon became a cultural touchstone. It's been name-dropped by everyone from Busta Rhymes to Tarantino. Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor team up for the third time, after Silver Streak and Stir Crazy, this time with one of the weirdest buddy setups ever. Wilder plays a deaf guy, Pryor plays a blind guy. They somehow witness a murder, kind of, and end up trying to solve the case while avoiding the cops and the killers. It's part murder mystery, part slapstick, and really just about their chemistry carrying the whole thing. Arthur Hiller directed it, but a lot of the best scenes came from Wilder and Pryor improvising together. Wilder even co-wrote the script and had final say on it, which ended up being a good thing because Columbia Pictures apparently wanted to sideline the duo in favor of a more traditional crime plot. Budget was $18 million, and it made $46 million in the US, which was solid. In fact, it did especially well in the UK and overseas, pretty impressive considering Pryor's health was declining fast. He was already dealing with multiple sclerosis during filming, and Wilder had to step in a few times to help him with lines. Still, they kept things tight. They were friends off camera too, and you can see that in the way they bounce off each other. The movie crushed on home video and ended up being one of Pryor's last major box office wins before his health forced him out of the spotlight. This one's simple on paper. Nerdy kid accidentally pisses off the terrifying new guy at school, and now he's got until 3 p.m. to either run, hide, or somehow survive a beating. The whole movie is just this slow, tense build-up to an after-school fight. But the way it's made is completely next level. It was directed by Phil Joannou, 24 years old at the time, and handpicked by Spielberg, who loved his USC short film. Spielberg even backed the movie through Amblin. until Universal started freaking out about how dark and intense it turned out. They pulled Spielberg's name off the final cut so it wouldn't mess with his family-friendly image. The movie cost $5 million and didn't even make that back. Total flop. But visually it's wild. They're doing De Palma-style tracking shots, Scorsese camera moves, insane energy, all in a high school. Filmmakers today love this thing. Edgar Wright once said it's like watching Raging Bull but in a school hallway. And he's not wrong. No other teen movie looks like this one. Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines as Chicago cops who are just over it. They bust a drug ring, try to retire, and then of course get pulled right back in. The plot's nothing special, but the way it plays out is, it's not just another action comedy. Crystal and Hines actually feel like real friends. They're not yelling at each other the whole movie, and they're not doing the good cop, bad cop thing. They just click. They shot it all in Chicago in the middle of winter. Crystal later said it was brutal, but it paid off. The movie moves fast, it looks great, and it crushed at the box office. Made over $38 million on a $15 million budget. Solid win. They were offered a sequel, but both Crystal and Hines turned it down. Didn't want to get locked into a franchise. Critics didn't care much at the time, but over time it stuck around. Mostly because of that vibe between the leads, and it had a killer soundtrack. Michael McDonald's Sweet Freedom hit number 7 on the charts. This one is easily one of the most underrated haunted house movies out there. George C. Scott plays a composer who loses his wife and kid in a freak accident. He moves into this huge old house to grieve, and yes, it's haunted. But this isn't Jump Scare City, it's a slow mystery. There's a secret room, a child's wheelchair that moves on its own, a decades-old murder, and a political cover-up involving a U.S. senator. It's creepy without being loud about it. It was loosely based on a real story. The writer, Russell Hunter, said it was inspired by stuff that happened to him in a Denver mansion back in the 60s. The movie had a budget of about $6.6 million and made close to double that in North America, more overseas through video and international releases. It even beat out The Shining at the 1980 Saturn Awards for Best Foreign Film. Scott was super involved, pushed for a more serious take, rewrote parts of the script to focus more on grief instead of just scares. Universal actually passed on it early, said it was too slow, but directors like Scorsese and Guillermo del Toro have called it one of their favorites. Del Toro even said it's essential for ghost storytelling. Cloak Dagger is about an 11-year-old named Davy who's obsessed with spy games and video arcades until he accidentally witnesses a real murder and ends up running for his life with a secret military message hidden inside an Atari cartridge. The only person who believes him is imaginary friend Jack Flack, who also happens to look just like his dad, both played by Dabney Coleman. And yeah, the movie leans hard into the blurred line between fantasy and reality. People die in this thing, like actual on-screen deaths, and it's still somehow rated PG. This was one of the first movies to actually tie directly into the video game craze. Atari was supposed to release a real Cloak and Dagger game in arcades, but then the whole game industry crashed in 1983, so that never happened. The game in the movie is real. It's Atari 5200 graphics, running off a modded prototype cart. It came out in summer 1984. Same time as Ghostbusters, Temple of Doom, The Karate Kid, and of course it got buried. Cost $13 million, made under 10. But over the years, it became a cult classic. If you were a kid in the 80s, this movie probably freaked you out more than half the R-rated stuff you weren't allowed to watch. Now here's one that most people missed completely. It stars a very young Kiefer Sutherland, way before Flatliners, long before 24, as a rich, awkward kleptomaniac who falls in love with a deaf store clerk. She's played by Vanessa Vaughn, a real-life deaf actress, and it ended up being her only major role. It was shot in Montreal on a small Canadian budget. Nothing huge, and barely anyone saw it in theaters. Most people in the US found it later on VHS, usually just because Kiefer's face was on the cover. It's got a very specific vibe, Definitely not your usual 80s teen romance. No prom scenes, no fake high school cool kids, just two odd people trying to connect. And because it's Canadian, it doesn't force the story into a big Hollywood ending. It's also one of those rare films where a romance between two very different people actually feels believable, not just written to check a box. Kiefer's great in it, and if you're tired of watching 27-year-old supermodels pretend to be outcasts, this is a nice break from all that. And now for one that completely crashed and burned. Date with an Angel from 1987. This one stars Michael E. Knight, the soap guy from All My Children, as a guy about to get married until an actual angel falls from the sky and lands in his swimming pool. The angel is played by Emmanuelle Béard, who was already kind of a big deal in France, and her character doesn't speak a single word in the movie, mute the whole time. Now, that wasn't a creative choice. It was because she didn't speak English yet. And yeah, critics saw right through that and called it out as a lazy gimmick. It was supposed to be this cute, splash-style fantasy rom-com, but the comedy falls flat. The romance is weird and the tone is all over the place. It cost about $4 million, made less than $2 million in the US, and just kind of disappeared. Even worse, there was a lawsuit. A screenwriter claimed the whole thing was stolen from a short script he had submitted years earlier. It never made it to court, but that cloud was hanging over the release, which didn't help. Critics hated it. The Los Angeles Times called it numbingly idiotic. Knight never headlined another major film again. Mary Steenburgen plays a broke actress who gets offered this last-minute film role at some creepy estate in the middle of nowhere. She shows up, gets drugged, locked up, and dragged into this insane scheme where she has to impersonate someone, or possibly multiple someones, while trying to stay alive. It's a gothic thriller directed by Arthur Penn, the guy who made Bonnie and Clyde. But this one? Not exactly a comeback. They shot it in upstate New York on a $4.5 million budget. MGM backed it but had no clue how to sell it. They dumped it into theaters in January 1987, right in the dead zone between Oscar movies and leftover action flicks. It made less than $3 million and disappeared fast. Steenburgen plays 3 roles here. No special effects, no tricks. She worked with a vocal coach to do different accents and even coached her own body double to make the long shots match. Some critics were into it. The Washington Post called it a masterclass in misdirection. Most just said it felt like a knockoff of Diabolique or Repulsion. It ended up being one of Arthur Penn's last films. He left Hollywood not long after, totally fed up with the way studios handled adult thrillers in the post-Jaws era. Dream Machine is a straight-to-video thriller where a baby-faced Corey Haim plays a college kid. He somehow ends up with a murdered guy's Porsche with the body still in the trunk. That's the whole plot. It was supposed to get a small theatrical run, but the test screenings bombed so hard they sent it straight to video in the States. Overseas, it showed up in a few theaters and quietly flopped. It was shot in 1989, but delays hit when the studio, Shapiro-Glickenhaus, started falling apart after The Exterminator 2 flopped. No one knows the actual budget, but it looks like late 80s cable TV money. Corey Haim was fresh out of rehab and later said in an interview he didn't even remember filming half of it. In his words, the worst movie I ever did, which is saying something when Prayer of the Roller Boys is on your resume. Video stores still moved copies, though, because his name was huge, and they plastered it on the VHS cover next to a shiny Porsche. The whole body in the trunk angle was supposed to be dark comedy, but test audiences didn't get it, so they edited most of the edge out and played it safer. This one is a Cold War hacker thriller about a young computer genius who figures out how to scam ATMs and then accidentally uncovers a Soviet plot involving nukes. It's like War Games mixed with 3 Days of the Condor, just with way less money. It was directed by Michael Farkas, who came from a commercial background, and made for under $2 million. Barely got a theatrical release, mostly just in LA and Texas, then vanished. But once it hit VHS, it actually found a little cult following, especially with tech nerds. Problem is, the movie's hacking is total nonsense. But that didn't stop people from trying it. After the VHS came out, there were actual real-life attempts to copy the ATM trick, and banks had to put out public statements saying the movie was pure fiction. Total panic over a movie hardly anyone saw. This one is a moody teen drama with Steel Town setting and one of the weirdest school dance scenes ever filmed. Aidan Quinn plays the working-class bad boy. Daryl Hannah is the rich cheerleader. They fall for each other, steal a motorcycle, get into fights, the usual forbidden romance stuff. And yeah, the dance scene I mentioned? It's set to Never Say Never by Romeo Void, and it is completely unhinged. Worth watching just for that. This was Quinn's first movie. He came straight out of stage acting. James Foley directed it. Same guy who'd go on to do Glengarry Glen Ross. The script was by Chris Columbus, right before he wrote Gremlins. It was basically pitched as gritty, risky business, which it kind of is. Thing is, test audiences hated the ending. Paramount panicked and forced Foley to shoot a happier one, even though he was totally against it. The whole tone got softened up. Didn't help. It made around $8 million on a $12 million budget and flopped. But over time, it picked up a cult following, mostly because of the soundtrack. This thing had In Excess, the Psychedelic Furs, Simple Minds, before any of those bands really broke in the US. It's one of those films that didn't hit when it came out, but if you catch it today, it kind of works better than a lot of the big teen dramas from that decade. This one's basically Donnie Brasco with car thieves. Charlie Sheen plays a smooth-talking Porsche thief. Dan Sweeney is the rookie cop who goes undercover, starts liking the guy, gets involved with his sister, and yeah, gets way too deep into the whole stolen car scene. It was written by Dick Wolf, as in Law & Order Dick Wolf, trying to break into movies. Directed by Peter Werner, shot mostly at night all around LA. They had a $3.5 million budget and the movie barely made that back. Pulled in just under $3 million, but it blew up on cable in the early 90s. Total VHS classic. Sweeney actually did most of his own driving. Sheen, on the other hand, was reportedly showing up hungover and doing dumb stuff like racing stunt drivers' personal cars on set. One story says he crashed a Porsche into a curb between takes. Sheen later said he loved doing the movie. I got to play rich and steal Porsches. What's not to like? Way before Mad Max Fury Road, Australia gave us Bmx Bandits. This ridiculous crime caper stars a 16-year-old Nicole Kidman with a curly orange perm. She and her BMX riding friends steal walkie-talkies from gangsters and end up in a bike chase across Sydney. There are heists, water slides, exploding bikes. It's ridiculous and kind of amazing. Brian Trenchard Smith directed it, the king of Ozploitation, and it was made for under $1 million Aussie dollars. Didn't do huge numbers in US theaters, but it exploded on VHS. In the UK, BMX kids went nuts for it. They even released knockoff riding gear just to cash in on the hype. The stunts are wild. There's barely any safety gear, and they filmed inside a real water park. Trenchard Smith later admitted the insurance people would have lost their minds if they'd actually seen how they pulled this off. And it wasn't just a goofy kids movie. It's the one that got Nicole Kidman noticed in Hollywood. Quentin Tarantino straight up said that in a Q&A back in 2016. He called it ridiculous but lovable, which is a pretty accurate summary.